Isso.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fabrício Assunção. I'm the coordinator of the Spiritus Society of Bournemouth and the Joanna de Angelis International Study Groups. I welcome you all to our Spiritist study group, where we explore the teachings of Spiritism and delve into the first book by Joanna de Angelis in her psychological series entitled The Currentness of Jesus. I give a big thank you to each of our speakers being with us tonight. They are Dan Sisi, Silvia Gibbons, and hopefully shortly Umberto. Dr. Danasis from the Spirit Institute is in the USA. Dan is an author and gives public talks on spirituality and spiritism in the USA and internationally. Silvia Gibbons is a member of the Chico Xavier Spiritus Society in the UK. She's a
I'm not a
humanistic
member.
counselor, bioenergetic, psychodrama, and deep memory process therapist, interpreter, and translator. All of us gather tonight to discuss and reflect on Joanna Giangi's teaching. I invite everyone to share your thoughts, insights, and questions. Our goal is to create a supportive and thought-provoking environment that fosters a deeper understanding of Spiritism and its principles. Our study group is a safe place for reflection, discussion, and spiritual growth. In this session, we will delve into the chapter 5 of the book, The Currents of Jesus, which is called Jesus and Tolerance. To start our discussion, I invite Sylvia Gibbons to open the debate. Over to you, Sylvia.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Many blessings. And we're going to introduce chapter 5. One of the things that actually struck me when I was reading and going through this is how short it is and how absolutely incredibly depth there is this there is an incredible depth on that. There's so much to learn, to discuss. And I felt, I don't know how you feel, probably you'll be able to tell us afterwards, but it's almost like looking into a mirror, really. Because this is, of course, is one of the most important things about judgment. Um, and Joanna is so very clear, and she starts saying that in depth psychology, this is inhuman to be criticizing other people. It's not the right thing to do. Um, and a- and then she goes on to say that the problem that when someone does something wrong, it means that they themselves already suffering it, the consequence of it. And I think this is one of the very most important things for us to recognize in ourselves, not to judge others. And sometimes when we are the victims, we feel very angry and very upset and all sorts of things. And that's when, people usually, we want vengeance, we want to see the person who hurt us suffer. And she says exactly the opposite, because I think that's one of the most important things to remember about Joanna de Anjou, that she is first and foremost a follower of Jesus. From the moment that she met him, all her lives were dedicated to his service. And she was with Jesus, she lived with him. So there is no one better to explain his thoughts and the words in the Gospels. And I think it's so very important because in the point of view of thinking about the Gospels and the many examples, and she actually quotes here two very, very important parts of the Gospel about judgment, but that we need to really think about what we're doing when we comment something negative about the people, because this is very, it's not a good thing to do for ourselves, especially. And I think one of the things that Joanna said, she says, is a kind of, let me see if I, yeah, she says it's a kind of vengeance pleasure that we have in talking about something negative And it's almost like if we say something that they're negative about them, makes us feel better, makes us feel superior. And this, sometimes maybe we're not even aware of certain comments we make that, we think, oh, I'm in a superior way because I don't do what they are doing. I find this very, very important for us to do that. And I think, sorry, and I think Fabrizio put that one of the points that Joanna makes is that we are actually projecting our shadow on other people. And it's interesting because Jung says in one of his quotes that what we don't like on other people is that we project on them. We see on other people what we don't like in ourselves. That's the thing that makes us. And this is so interesting because we don't like something in ourselves when we project in others. So we see it in others. In a way, she says, it gives you a sort of, you justify yourself almost, oh, they're like this. But we are looking, we're seeing things in other people because we actually projecting what we don't like in ourselves. And this is interesting. And then she goes on to say that, when Jesus, he was very, very hard on people who judged others. And we know that. And she says, well, that one of the things that uh, when we judge, we don't really know the causes that are um, causing that person to behave in that way or do what they are doing. We just see maybe what is in front rather than understanding. Because if we were to take the time to think about it, to see what's happening, we wouldn't judge because we would see the difficulties that the person may be going through. And she says here, the personal judgment to ignore the roots of the problems and also review a moral primitivism of human beings who assume their siblings wolf. And I thought this sentence was incredible. It's it's quite hard, I think, but it's very, very true because when you judge others, we are still other people's wolves. We are still the ones chasing them and looking into to what they are doing wrong. And that is this very I think is a phrase from Erastus in the Gospel according to Spiritism, who says that only wolves fall into wolves' traps. And I think this is so applicable to the situation because what she says, we are the ones who judge, feel superior to others. And she goes on to say about one of the most, she said, the beautiful image that Jesus has in when we criticize others. He says, you don't see the speck. You see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but you don't see the beam in your own. And this is so true. I mean, this is one of the parts of the gospel that really you have to sit and meditate. How many times I judge other people? How many times I don't see their point of view because of my own prejudice, of my own difficulties. And I think one of the points that came to me here, and you be able to see what you think about that for yourselves after, is that if while I look at other people's problems and mistakes that I consider it, they might not do. I don't see my own. I don't take the time to look at my own thing. And just something, something personal. I remember when I was a teenager, I used to be, oh, and sometimes I came home and I said to my mother, "This happened and that happened," and my mother always says, but don't worry about this because maybe the person, she wasn't very happy. Something happened in her house. She was upset. Don't take it to heart. She didn't mean to hurt you. Just think about it and leave it because she probably was very unhappy and that's why she behaved and did whatever. And I remember once in when my mother said something like this to me, she used to do it all the time. And I remember saying to her, you never see my point of view. You always see the other people's. And I'm very upset about this because you always look at other people's, they write, there's always an excuse for them. You never see my point of view. And it's taken her many, many, many years for me to understand how wise she was, because that's exactly that. When someone is unhappy or they've done something, they're going through a problem that we don't know. They may be aggressive or rude. So if we just don't take it personally. And I think that's exactly the point that Joanna makes here, that when the person commits something or does something that is wrong, their own their own sin or their own that thing will cause them more harm than it causes us, because we are only responsible for the things that we do, not for the other people's things. When we go to the spiritual world, and like Andrea Luiz says in Osula, you look at the mirror of your conscience, and that's what we'll be looking at. We'll be looking what we've done, the things we did, not other people's. We're not going to answer for anybody else. And I think that's the point that Joanna makes here, because they themselves are the one who causes. They will be in trouble already for the thing. So for us, we have to tolerate that. And another example that she quotes here, and it is one of the most touching, actually, of the examples in the gospel, is about the woman who is brought to Jesus, and he's sitting there writing on the sand, and the people keep trying to make him say something. He said, oh, Moses said that she should be condemned. And of course, they were testing him, because they were all the time testing Jesus to see what he was going to say. And of course, they say, Moses said that this should happen to her. What do you say? And Jesus' phrase was amazing. Among you, the one who have no sin, be the first one to stone her. And their own conscience said no. None of them were pure enough to stone anybody. And they went on and left. And then Jesus said, nobody judged you. And she said, no. And he said, I will not either. Go and see no more. And this is extremely important, because I think that's the main point here that Joanna's saying. Give your hand to someone who have committed something. Tolerate, understand. I think tolerance is more in the sense of understanding what's happened to that person. Don't be angry or want vengeance. Just let go. And she make another point, which I thought as well was very, very important here, because she said, maybe they are your future when you yourself won't be strong enough to not follow the path of goodness. And we do. Things happen. We lose ourselves sometimes. We get upset. You have a lot of problems, relationships, health, all sorts of things, unemployment, whatever it is. And we may not be as kind as we should do. So I think when you're in a position to be kinder to others, be the kind to others, be the understanding part, be the one who breaks the cycle, and be the one who understands, because sometimes we ourselves will need understanding. And I think the point that she makes, that we would like to have compassion, to have understanding and tolerance when we ourselves, if we are in that kind of position, we would like people to be kind to us, to understand and to tolerate us. And I think that's, one of the most important things. But every sentence in this uh, chapter here is so incredible, is to see it and think about and meditate on it. And really, really, I felt it was like a mirror for ourselves, for our own conscience, and not to be judgmental. And just to conclude, one of the things, Amélia Rodrigues is another writer that writes with Divaldo Franco, and she writes a lot of stories about the the continuity of Jesus and everything. And in one of her books, she talks about the woman who after she left Jesus, she goes home, and her husband is there because he heard she was going to be stoned, and he himself had been someone who wasn't very good, had done, lots of bad things himself. And then when she comes home and she tells him and everything, and because of the old situation, they leave, they go into another place and they live on together, and they make like a house or something for people who are in need. So in the end, they keep helping people who are hungry, who are sick and everything. So she really, after that, she didn't go on to her old life. Her and her husband, they both went away and became a completely different people from what they were in helping others who were in greater need. And I think this is, that's what I have to say, to give you a chance anyway to say all the things. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, there you go. Um, so thank you, Sue, very much for sharing that. So then I'm coming to you for you to share your insights. When you're reading the book, what struck you the most when Joanna was talking about Jesus and tolerance? What was your connections insights with that?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Sylvia, for the summary and for leading us today in here. And Fabrizio, hello. I think that Sylvia did a great job there on thoroughly explaining to us the context of the thing. And I think I wholeheartedly agree with her on the how powerful and how beautiful this is. So short yet so deep, right? For me, there's so many different things I think that Sylvia covered, but there's two um, powerful points. I think for me, the first one, when we use that example of the wolf, and I think it's a very powerful imagery, right? And talking about the primitive instincts, it really leads me to this idea of us freeing ourselves and part of our evolutionary process from the instincts that have helped us evolve and protect ourselves and to step into intentionality. So we have this wonderful inheritance of instinct that has been able to keep us alive, physically speaking, for eons, so that we could arrive at a point where our spirit is mature enough to try to take a new point, a new step towards intentionality, right? When we are choosing not to react, instead to act. But those instincts are still within us. And so the wolf is such a powerful imagery because what do wolves do when they hunt? Right? They separate people from the pack or their preys, and they go for it. They are sneaky, they are planning, and they're obviously survival. So oftentimes I equate that to this unconscious process that happens within us in which we have to go hunting and put other people down to feel better about ourselves. That's the part of the instinct, right? As if there can only be one, either one of us, only one of us can win. And that is a very materialistic or physicalist perspective because we know that spiritually, we only win when everybody wins, right? And so, in many different ways, I love that image. But what I love about this image the most is because the more I think about this, I think a little bit about the concept of distance. What do I mean by that? I mean that as I read what Joanna is writing and interpreting the actions of the Christ and his teachings to us, it's really about the posture that we take towards other people. The moment that we have tolerance and empathy, we are bringing ourselves close to others. We are diminishing the distance that separates us as we identify in each other commonalities. We understand that we are spiritual spirits in a spiritual journey. We understand there's suffering. We understand that people make mistakes, and we come closer to our brothers and sisters who have sinned or made a mistake, just like us, right? But when we judge, we literally take ourselves out and we put ourselves in a superior position as if we are creating space between you and I, separating us because I am better than you, because I would never have done that. I've seen you make a mistake there. So this concept of space is an interesting one, because my next question is, if I am judging you, then why is it that I'm putting space between myself and you? What is it that I need out of that space? I have that fear of looking into the shadow processes that are taking place within myself. And so I want to put that into somebody else and have them move as far as away from me as possible, because then I don't have to do the work of looking inside myself. So it's so much easier, as Joanna says, to transfer our shadow challenges to somebody else and leave that at that superficial level and say, huh, that person is not great. I would never do that, right? And in doing that, we run into all these problems. So I really appreciate this perspective that she shares with us, and when she talks about this, right? And I think that she gives us a little recipe at the end too. I love the last sentences of all this, because um, she obviously brings the example of the Christ, and I think that just in short and sweet on that part of the Christ is, here's all this theory that the Christ has brought us about forgiveness and so forth. And she explains the why of it, right? We're all going to go through this. But she also says, hey, this is lived experience. He's not just telling us theory. He actually lived that. People were not kind to him, and he forgave them. He connected with them. He brought them closer. He did not judge them, right? So there's a living experience. It's like, it's not just like trust what I say or do what I say. Is There's a lot of do what I do when it comes to Christ, right? But I love her, so I don't talk too much. I love the last kind of recipe that she gives us. She says at the end, have compassion for those who fall. And then she says, help those who tumble. And then she says, tolerate the offender. But she always tells us the why, right? So compassion, help, and tolerate, right? Have compassion because the people who fail, their conscience will be their judge. Right? We know what the process looks like when we're close to other people. We know regret. We know how it feels bad to make a mistake and realize that. So have compassion, have that identity, have that connection as a human, right? Help those who tumble. Their weakness is already their punishment. People who tumble obviously haven't mastered that yet. So we know that they need to work on something, just like we have to work on something. So that's the reason why we help those who tumble, because they need to learn something, much the same way that we need to learn something. And tolerate the offender. They are your future if you do not have the strength to follow the good pathway, right? Because if we can't do this, then we're going to do the same things that they've done. And I think that is such a powerful thing. And we can talk about the last sentence, which I think is great. But I caught myself thinking about, why is it that sometimes we want to put distance between us and others? What is it in our relationship with ourselves that makes us put that distance between you and I, as opposed to bring you closer, right? Tolerance and forgiveness brings you closer. Judgment moves you away from me. So that's just a couple of thoughts that I was thinking about the whole concept of distance there, and the shift from instinct to intentionality to intuition to spirits, and how we need to go on this journey of self-discovery. But enough about me. How about you, Fabrizio? What were your takeaways about this stuff? As Umberto dives in. Hi, Umberto. Great to see you. Thanks for joining.
Hello. So before I share mine, I'm gonna go to Umberto.
Oh, no, you
Umber-
can't throw him under the bus like that, Fabrizio. He just got into the call.
okay.
Come
Okay.
on
So let
now.
okay, let me then share my insights. When I was reading Joanna, and it's very interesting than what you just mentioned, because when we judge, we put ourselves in a big distance from others, right? And then I was thinking on that, and I said, well, that happen when you do to others, but that also happen when you do that to ourselves, you know? Because when I was reading it, I was thinking me judging myself and me judging others, because it's the same process. We judge ourselves, and sometimes we lack of self-love, sometimes we don't love ourselves enough, and then we also apply that same judgment to ourselves. So my analysis was, okay, Fab, start with yourself. Why do you judge yourself so much? And I was questioning that. I said, before you actually go and judge others, which is something you do, I was asking myself when I was reading the chapter, why am I judging myself too much? And that is something I want to discuss further with all of you as something that I think anyone here say, I don't judge anyone or myself, I think we need to revisit that because we judge people the way they look, we judge people the way they dress, we judge people the way they speak, we judge people the way they conduct themselves, what they have studied, they have gone to university. We are constantly in a society, we are constantly judging people for their differences, for people thinks different than us in so many aspects, in so many differences. Um, for me, I was trying to get answers for that as why we judge. And then one thing that triggered in me as I was asking myself the question, is it because, in a way, you kind of fear the differences because we kind of need to make this judgment because we've down, really down the emotions that we're carrying in our heart when you're judging it? Is it down to fears? Are we fearing the differences? Are we fearing that someone is better or worse than us, and therefore we need to apply those judgments to put ourselves in a better place, maybe? Um, one interesting thought that I was actually applying this to myself also is why we worry so much about the mistakes that others do. Why do we judge so much the ones that, for instance, if you see someone stealing a plant next door, why that is triggers so much? Why do you judge him? Oh my God, can't believe he's doing that. I wouldn't do that. I would never touch my neighbor's plant. But why he's doing that? And I was thinking also using the current terms that we hear that a lot nowadays. People say um, about karma, and they say about what goes around comes around, right? And then Joanna say in one of her comments that the problem of sin belongs to whoever commits it, right? And then I was asking them, okay, so if it's their problem, why do we bother so much of judging people's mistakes? I want to hear the group to answer me that because I'm still like thinking that that's why people's sins or people's wrongdoing um, challenges so much and triggers so much when we know if someone commit a crime, they are the one that's going to pay for it. We know really well, we have been studying this quite a lot. What goes around comes around. Their karma,
Yeah,
okay, they done
yeah,
something wrong, um
yeah,
they're going to have to pay for it. But why is still bother us
yeah.
so much?
I wish that Anna he was here so that we could ask her a little bit about that. But I wonder if the guilt paragraph here has something to tell us about this issue, right? Because guilt is a disturbing shadow on one's personality. So I think that we are brewing on our insufficiencies, our insecurities, our inadequacies, and they are running behind us, right? Like in our, on the back of our minds without us noticing. And when we find somebody else making a mistake, then we feel like, oh, great, I'm not that bad. I can shift my attention. I can put that into somebody else, right? And we get a pass a little bit for ourselves. We feel like, oh, I'm not that bad. Somebody else is doing, or I feel better. So I wish that we could explain that in a more powerful way. But that's my gut feeling here first. But I would love to hear from other folks.
I will call Umberto, put him on the spotlight.
Great, guys. Good evening. Well, I would like to play the philosopher for a while and ask you what is actually to judge? What do we mean by that? What is the definition of judging here? Because to a great extent, that's absolutely inevitable.
Mhm.
If someone says something silly now, would we not notice and would we not react like, what was this guy saying? And that's a judgment that is justified, that is perfectly natural and is justified. But that doesn't seem to be what she's talking about here. She's discriminating a specific type of moral flaw that is connected to excessive judgment and also to an arrogance, a specific arrogance of believing that you can come to a conclusion about a person, that you can define a person by something that she said, something that she's dressing, or something that she did, and that's the harm. That's the harmful part of judging. We have many philosophers, for example, or psychologists that will say, well, judging is a mental faculty. You automatically discriminate and judge things according to its relevance, according to its fitness to uh, society standards, for example. Is it adequate or not to dress? Is it adequate or not to say in this environment, maybe in another environment? And that's to some extent part of our rationality, to our capacity to check if what we are doing and saying is adequate or not, or if I'm harming someone or not. And I would not go in the direction of saying, for example, we should never judge in any circumstance, because that would lead to this conclusion. But I think one of the main points of the book and of the author in general, of Joanna Angelis in general, is her philosophical and psychological focus on consciousness. So whatever she considers harmful is the lack of consciousness. Like, for example, judging someone, believing I am superior to this person, believing that, well, this is a bad person, this is an inferior, this is a stupid person, and I'm not like that. I don't have these flaws, I don't have these deficiencies. And in this movement of your consciousness, you do not recognize that you're incapable of judging correctly. You're not only forming an opinion or reacting to something or to someone, you are defining someone for good because of one act or one characteristic, and that dehumanize this person, which is free and ever changing. So when I judge Fabrizio for a specific character trait, I forget that tomorrow he may not have it. Or even now, when he has this character trait, he may be very well justified in his life story, in his personal history, for having this character trait. And as the parable of the speck and the beam shows, we are very, very good in noticing fine details in everyone else and forgetting our own deficiencies. Now, the very opposite of this lack of consciousness about your capacity to judge would be the attempt that I think Dan emphasized, the attempt to do what wise people do. And that's the exact opposite of judging. It is an active movement of overcoming yourself and trying to emulate virtue, which is the opposite of discriminating and judging people, which is not productive.
Thank you, Humberto. I think we have some people who has raised their hands, so I'm gonna go to Andreas.
No, for me, something came just really simple. Hi, everybody. I think judgment is wanting it different for the self and wanting it different for collectiveness. So usually when we're in a group, we believe the only reason why we judge is because not of the other did wrong, but because we want it different for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm coming to you, Ian.
Yes, I really liked what was said. Dan's points about the bringing together and being far apart was really good. But following on from what Roberto was saying, if I look at John 7, he different from Matthew and Luke. He has Jesus saying, "Stop judging by mere appearances, but judge correctly." If we look at the Bible and we think about Sodom and Gomorrah, were they judged? If we think about in in John 8, at the end of John 8, Jesus says to the Jews that they are sons of the devil. Is he judging them? In another part of the Gospels, Peter is called Satan by Jesus. Is that a judgment? Well, maybe. However, when we think about Jesus, he is at a kind of different stage of evolution, spiritual evolution, than we are. So he is, as is made quite plainly in many parts of the Bible, he is able to judge. He is the judge of us all, according to some parts of the Bible. So I think it depends on, I mean, this phrase in Luke, why do you look at the speck of dust in your brother's eye, is the most important thing, because then we can see that if we are doing the same things as Sylvia said about the woman who is being stoned, then we are in no position to judge anybody. So we kind of do these things, I believe, because we have to feed our own ego. And this is the big battle that we have to really set against ourselves. I mean, we have to really look at ourselves before looking at anybody else, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Ian. I think that what you're speaking goes to the heart of what Umberto brought us, right? Which is the judgment piece. Like, there is a moral pejorative judgment that presupposes superiority over others. But there's an intellectual process of judging, which is discerning and telling things apart. That is natural. I think that the difference here, in a way, with Jesus and judgment in general, is Jesus was such at a high level of consciousness and development that there was no self-interest in that judgment. And so sometimes our judgment comes out of self-interest, right? For either placing ourselves higher or not. But when you are devoid of that self-interest, when you are aligned with the desires of the Most High, of the order of the universe, whatever it is, then you want for people what is best for them, and you don't have the moral judgment, right? And this is why I think it's so beautiful that Joanna does this before I pass it to Sylvia, is that when talking about Jesus, she says, naturally, Jesus, did not solve all the problems, neither did he help everyone in the way they wanted, right? Nevertheless, compassion, he loved them, embracing them in tenderness. And here's what the part I like, and teaching them techniques for liberation in order to acquire peace. So his teaching approach is not giving us what we want because we don't know better. His approach is to empower us to free ourselves from the cycle of self-interest that we tend to run on by expanding our consciousness to the largeness of life, by taking us and saying, hey, you're not just your physical body, you're a spirit that lives through many things. And when we can see that perspective, the judgment part, I think, becomes the judgmental part becomes easier to deal with. The judging will always occur because that is an intellective process that needs to happen. I need to be differentiate whether it's safe for me to cross the street or not. So I am judging if the cars are coming fast enough, right? This is natural, but I am not passing judgment. And I think that's a great point that you bring in there. And I'll shut my trap and see if Sylvia has something to add here.
Yes, I think the point I want to make is that I think this text really is for us to judge ourselves in our own behavior. Like I said, more and more, the more I read this, more I see it as a mirror. Because there is a point here that Joanna says in the text, after she says that Jesus was very strict in educating those who judge the behavior of others. And then she goes on to say, certainly there are courts and authorities appointed to carry out the ministry of moral hygiene in society, which are in charge of the processes involving the offenders and who judge them, establishing means of re-education, never punitive, because if they did so, they would commit identical, if not more serious errors. So I think what she's saying here is depending on the crime, because we needed to be very careful sometimes, because we can spread out into other things. If someone is committing a crime that will harm other people, that we need to stop them. And I think Joanna is making the point here that there are authorities that are appointed to do judgment. And she says here in order to carry out the ministry of moral hygiene of society. So we have lawyers, we have judges, we have courts, and when people do wrong things, commit crimes, they have to be judged. And those people they have special courts and everything that will judge them is for that. I think she means more that, and the point was made several times, that somehow when we think we judge others, we feel ourselves to be better than they are. And I think that's one of the problems. And also, like she goes to say, is a kind of vengeance pleasure to see that other people are doing something wrong. And it's almost within us this. And I think she's calling us to have a look, to see ourselves before um, we judge others, and not actually. She's saying, do not judge others ever. Judge yourself whenever you feel that someone has a problem. What would I do if I was in that person's shoes? How would I behave if that thing happened to me? Why do they? And I think sometimes, we do. There are certain things that happen, and you think, oh, look at that. So, oh no, but sometimes I do that. So immediately, it calls upon yourself. No, you can't say anything because you do it yourself. And I think she makes this point very, very clear because if anything, the reason why we need to be tolerant, we need to be understanding with other people's difficulties and problems is because they are a future when we're not strong enough to follow the path to goodness. And I think this for me is one of the most important things because what we judge now, it may be depending on the situation, what life does, we will be in that situation exactly like the other person, and we will be wanting someone to be understanding and to be tolerant and to be kind. I think, for me, more and more, the more I read this text, the more I hear what other people are saying, the more I feel this is like a mirror, really. And I always think about only wolves falls into wolves' trap. And, don't be anybody's fool because one day you will fall in the trap yourself. So I feel this is very important because for the main, there is people who are appointed to be judges, and it's not our role to judge one another. The best thing is never do it, really. Because, I think she makes a point there as well, that we ourselves sometimes are weighed down by our own errors when we're judging others, and that's when she makes the point of the eye. So,
Thank you, Sylvia. I have got Victoria who raised her hand on the Zoom chat. Victoria, do you want to share something?
Oh, yes, please.
Over to you.
I was just listening to all and all coming what comes to my head is Jesus saying to do not judge others. I can't remember the whole sentence, because they will also judge you. So that's one.
What judgment you judge, you'll be judged in return.
Exactly.
That's the words.
Yeah, so that's Jesus' words. So I always carry these with me. No, in a sense that I think at the same time, I think I judge all the time. So as soon as I meet someone, I kind of I'm not sure if it's a judgment or it's just observation that how the person is, the person in front of me, what she's saying, what he's saying, how. So you make the picture of the person for yourself and how you're gonna deal with that. But I think judgment is something else. It's like when Jesus said that words, it means that when you are judging for your own sake, like for your own safety, in a sense, that's it's not judgment, it's observation of the person. So you want to act upon that. So that's my few things that I got from judgments. And now also judge. Okay, the opposite of judgment is tolerance, isn't it? So when it comes to judgment, meaning that you are putting that person on the spotlight. So if you're just judging for yourself, like you're observing, you're liking it or not, that's your judgment for yourself. But when it comes to public, so judging someone and making that person appears a horrible person, and that's when your responsibility is greater because you are making that person probably a bad thing. Yeah. So what else did I write down?
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's like the ruler, isn't it? Like when you judge, you're using your own ruler, meaning that that's you. And that reminds me Socrates saying that the more I know that I know nothing. Meaning that our ruler is very limited. We are so limited. So what's the point to judge others? That's my question for myself, actually.
Thank you, Victoria. Before we move on to the next topic, does any of the speaker want to contribute anything before we move on to the different topic? Because I'm concerned about time. We have 10 minutes. Any comments on that?
I would like to return to the point that we have to discriminate very carefully the several different meanings we have for the word judgment, because I think it does lead to a lot of confusion. For example, when we have a very practical wisdom, sentence of practical wisdom is according to your best judgment. That's the most positive thing you could do because you're not obeying someone or you're not letting yourself to be led by someone's ideas. And the problem with this language is that it uses the word judgment for understanding. And in Joanna de Angelis' text, she's using the word judgment almost in the very opposite way. She's using judgment for the lack of understanding that life is super complex and you cannot be in anyone's shoes and walk anyone's shoes, and that you should be more humble than supposing that you could come to a conclusion and an explanation about anyone's behavior.
Thank you, Humberto. So I'm just gonna bring one more subject because we touched base very quickly on guilty. Joanna say, once we have done something wrong, it sits in our conscience in the form of guilty. And then the reason I'm bringing this up, and I want to hear what is your contributions, your views on this, because Joanna say, guilty is one of our shadow, and that leads us to serious illnesses. And then she mentioned also this project, we are projecting our shadows, you know? And I want to hear and maybe discuss here, how do we do that? How do we feel guilty? How do we project our shadow in the way that she's telling us here on this book? Because I think the most important thing is for us to reflect how we are doing that in ourselves, in our journey. And I want to hear your contribution on that. It's a question that everybody's going to be thinking like,
Hand up. I have my
it's a,
hand up, so can I
yes, Sylvia?
start?
Yes, please.
I think she says here actually in the text that we doing this for self-justification. Because what annoys us in other people maybe is something that we don't like in ourselves, and we project as you know, is this mirror we projecting it. So you know, she says here, when you project your shadow, means as a means of self-justification, because he says you are because which is you are unable to free them from the imposition of your own blemishes. I think she she says that herself. We judge others because we justify. It's almost like justification for ourselves because we cannot cope with our own difficulties, with our own problems. And I think this is it's something to really, really, really brings us to meditate on those words because they are very, very important. You know, whenever we see something that we disagree, and there is other things. I mean, you know, sometimes the way the person is, you're not judging them. It's just that sometimes they don't seem to like you or whatever, so you sort of react or whatever. It's just when you really start looking at the other person. I feel this personally, like, oh no, you know, that person is not like this and they're not like that, and I don't like this because of this, and they are horrible, and you see what way they do things, and I think that is the problem when we start picking things on people that we don't like because, and then we think, oh, you know, they are not nice because they are like this. And sometimes we don't know them at all. Sometimes they can be very, very, very nice people, really kind, really loving. But there's something, and I suppose that when you start picking things that you don't like on a person and projecting it, it's because there is a problem with you. And I think that's what she says, because you cannot cope with your own blemishes. So whenever I suppose whenever we feel like that, say, oh, I don't like this and that person. No, just a minute, let's see here. What do I do about me that I don't like? How am I going to clear this mountain of trouble or dislike for myself? Because I think you said something right at the beginning, Fabrice. I don't know if it was Fabrizio Dunn, who says I think it was you, Fabrizio, and you ask a question: why do we judge so much, and why do we judge ourselves so much? Because sometimes we judge ourselves as well so much. We sometimes we are our worst enemies, and we need to stop judging ourselves as well in such a critical way, because that's exactly what we do with the others, because we can't cope with our own, the weight of our own, the things we don't like about ourselves. I think it's something to think about, and you know, and start working in ourselves first. Then we won't have time to look at the other people.
Thank you, Sylvia. So I'm going to Dan and Umberto for the close remark, and then we will close the study group. Over to you, Dan.
So I think this very short chapter is powerful because it invites us to dive deeper into our perspective and others, and how closely we want to be to others and to ourselves. And what is it that it begs the question of what is it that we should be doing or thinking or exploring or discovering within ourselves that allows us to accept who we are the way we are and not try to pass on these blemishes to other people, thinking that we have gotten rid of them, right? Putting distance between my shortcomings. If I just blame somebody else, maybe I don't have that anymore. It's them. I don't need to look at myself, right? So I love that she calls us back to the teachings of the Christ who has come to teach us to do this reevaluation, to expand our mindset, to think differently about who we are, not only psychologically, but spiritually, see ourselves from a very much larger vantage point and move forward, right? And be happy because at the end of the day, that's what we all have. And we have beautiful examples out there. So I hope that we may have chance during this coming week to ponder about to first be aware when is it that we are negatively judging people, or I should say morally judging people, and walk back and say, huh, what's the mirror here? What is it that I am trying to avoid or dump into somebody else? And then just own that and just accept it for the way we are. And hopefully that will make us closer to everybody because everybody makes mistakes. We are immortal spirits in a beautiful, beautiful journey. And I love that these moments bring some awareness and help us exercise our spiritual muscle. Maybe we'll be able to translate into our lives and become more empathetic and more tolerant human beings. So thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank you, Don. Umberto, anything from you?
Well, I think we should return to guilt next meeting because I think guilt and regret have extremely positive roles. They play extremely positive roles in our morality because without them, we would lack the moral sense that we committed some sort of transgression, that we trespassed somehow. Of course, again, this is a very specific use of this word by Joanna de Angelis, and she's not talking about that. She's talking about, obviously, the most negative aspects of this process, which are harmful and unnecessary and that we should overcome. But, well, I think this meeting was very interesting because it also highlights what is in Joanna de Angelis' position, the light. The light is consciousness, is to be self-aware and to understand things before or understand things and not react automatically and instinctively to what people are saying or doing.
Thank you. I will share just a few of my insights and what will be my takeout from this meeting tonight. One thing that really triggers me is from what we've been discussing tonight, every time I'm judging someone, probably that is what I am, and I need to look into it. If I'm judging someone, probably I'm seeing what I don't like in others. That's Rana says a lot about that, the mirror. And I will need to look more. It's not about the other, it's actually me. You know, I'm pointing out things that I see in others, but probably is revealing a lot more about myself. Another thing that I liked when I was reading Joanna in this chapter, I make a little equation. And she said something like, every judgment we made, it's transformed in affliction for ourselves. You know, so that's why it's important for us to learn how not to judge, because every time you do so, we are afflicting our soul. So the equation is for every judgment made equal to affliction for myself. And another one is also is about tolerance as a fraternal therapy. Wow. So therapy, it's something that will bring healing. It will be very therapeutical for us. So therefore, I will look to way of how can I identify opportunities for me to exercise this therapy called tolerance. Because through that, practicing that, we were addressing that fact that she was talking about judgment, and guilty. So the more I practice that tolerance, probably the more I'm addressing the fact that I'm judging and I'm carrying guilt in my soul. So for that, I leave you all thinking on those points. Practice the tolerance therapy, which is what she's telling us and giving us some tips. Our next meeting is on the 16th of July. The topic will be Jesus and honor. So I will say now a good evening to everyone. Thanks for being with us, and I see you all soon. Bye for now.
God bless.